Salt of the Earth Farm Stories is proudly brought to you by Grig Media. Step into the world of farmers from diverse backgrounds across Australia. Through intimate interviews, host Darren Grigg delves into farming practices, traditions, and the challenges farmers face in nurturing the land.
In today's episode, we have an incredible conversation with Peter Barnes. Peter was living and working at Mungo Station, northeast of Mildura, when they unearthed human remains that date back over 40,000 years. We also look into his time managing Neds Corner Station, where he and his wife Colleen have done remarkable work rehabilitating country. They even have a newfound fungi named after them. Peter's story is one of dedication, respect for the land, and making a lasting impact. I sit down with Peter on the edge of the Murray River, just near Mildura. Good morning, Peter.
Good morning.
Thanks for joining me, mate. Tell me about where you were born, Peter.
I was actually born here in Mildura, and those days I think you were in hospital about a week and then back out to Mungo where Mum and Dad lived. There was two families there, my grandfather and Mum and Dad as well. So that was straight back to the country where Dad was actually born too.
So did your grandfather buy that station?
Yes, he was there, I'm not sure of the year, but he was there 40 years when it was sold in 1978.
Wow, how big was it then?
40,000 acres, which was a standard size for that area. It was a smaller part of the bigger Golgol station that was the original one, and then they were split up into around 40,000 acre blocks for returned soldiers and that, back in that era.
And what sort of country was that?
Mostly, I suppose, a typical lakebed country where you had saltbush plain and then mallee surrounding it. Bit of mallee and balar country. It was a big variation. So saltbush was probably 1/3 of it, and then you went into the mallee and sandhill country.
And what were they running there?
We had merino sheep, which back then were classed as probably fine wool. These days it wouldn't be, but the property, grandfather ran about 3,500 breeding ewes, merino ewes. He tended to always run understocked, and that was his own idea. And now I realise he is a bit of a conservationist in a way. So he often went into droughts pretty well, where others that were overstocked didn't do it. And back then, 3,500 merino ewes and 40,000 acres was enough for two families to survive off well.
Right. And wool prices were better then?
They were, yes, especially when he started. That was the boom time of the wool era, so it was really good. And Mungo, for anyone that knows it, the main woolshed there was the main original Golgol property woolshed, so it's most of it, 2/3 of it still remains there, and the bordering properties, which are now national parks, which were also relatives of my grandfather and grandmother.
Right.
Zanki, which is the national park now, 1/3 of the woolshed was put over there, and that was my grandmother's family, who moved from South Australia originally. And my grandfather grew up on the Darling River, Lethrow Station near Pooncarie.
Oh yeah. So it's quite a famous station, and it's renowned for its scientific research, especially with the geology and anthropology. Lake Mungo is home to the earliest modern human remains found in Australia and possibly the world.
Yes.
Mungo Man and Mungo Lady were unearthed there, and you were in the front seat watching all this unfold, is that right?
Yes, I felt I was lucky in a way, and more so nowadays, because I realise the significance of it. When I was 9, I came into school. Prior to that, Mum taught myself and my sister correspondence. Then I was about 15, 16, left school, and the condition from Mum and Dad was that I passed that year. I could go back out back. So I left school and worked for my grandfather. And all this was happening in that period in the late 60s. I knew all the archaeologists and professors, still occasionally run into some of them, and a lot are gone now. But I actually witnessed all the burials, and back then they used to dig them up and take them. I actually saw Professor Malvani empty his leather case out and carefully put the body into that and carry them off, which then to us seemed what was done, because they took them back to age them and do that. It's really good to know that it's been brought back now, the body's back to Mungo.
Right, is that what's happened? So there was quite a crew there.
Oh yes, there was always university students. They had usually one of the professors, quite often specialising in different areas, but the walls of China they're called, but this big white sandhill that's blowing up off the lake bed is moving roughly a metre a year to the east, and that's bringing out all sorts of things like stone artefacts and especially the big wombat that was came out mostly.
Tell me about that, the big wombat.
Oh well, the megafauna era. So this wombat was, I guess, 6 foot long and about 2 or 3 foot high. Sorry, working in old measurements, but a metre high, roughly. And
in the shape of our wombat that we know?
Yes, basically. So hairy-nosed wombat it was called, but just a giant. And I made Peter Clark, who became one of my best friends eventually, we helped dig one up, and he put the skeleton back together, and then they had a statue made of it, and it was quite scary to think they would have been walking around like that. So I actually got to work with these people, and it was so, I guess I learnt so much about the Aboriginal culture through that too, and appreciate it. And you know, we're all become part of the land of where we're born and grow up, and you felt like you were involved with it. So just seeing what they did, and even if it was probably the wrong way to take these things away then, it was how they learnt all this history of people, and just the age, 40 to 60,000.
That's what I was going to ask. My God.
Yes, it's incredible to think.
So was that quite moving for you as a kid or a teenager to?
It was as a teenager, and I was still running around, doing the normal property things, but just to witness that and be involved with it each time you'd hear they found something exciting, and even down to fish ears, so they knew the size of the fish that were around the lake and that sort of thing. I guess when I left school, I was pretty keen to make a bit of extra money, so I think the wages were about $6,000 a year then, that's from memory. And I actually made another $20,000 that first year shooting rabbits and running a chiller, and which often the rabbits out in that country, I'd say Dad was put through college.
Yeah.
I was put through the very little schooling I had.
So from meat or skins or both?
Mostly the meat sales. For the skins were a bit sort of, as I was growing up, they were doing a lot of skins, but I didn't have a lot to do with it. So I was probably 4 or 5, I was trapping rabbits, and but mostly they were shooting them for income then. And
would the rabbits be to blame a little bit for that sandhill moving?
A little bit, because they just strip the land when they come in. Stock as well would blame, but like I say, my grandfather was pretty cautious with that amount of stock he ran. Your rabbits and your normal wildlife and the goats in the country out there, they seem to all come into that area because the sandhills had soaks in them where they could get a bit of water supply occasionally.
Oh, yeah.
So it drew things to it.
Do you know anything about the richest fossil footprint?
I have never seen it, but I know when Peter Clark took the professors over to it to see it, they were just blown away with it. And that was on Garnpang, next door to Julnai. You've got Mungo, Julnai, Liaga, Garnpang. All those stations are now part of the bigger national park. And Peter eventually died of a brain tumour, but when he was quite crook, he took his friends to it and showed them, and that's where it started the research into that. Yeah. No, it's amazing.
And tell me, as a kid, when you were growing up out there, did you feel isolated?
Not really, because we just loved it. I think Mum did more so because of having to teach us and that. And, you know, we had, every animal was open to being a pet. I had, at one stage, a wild cat had kittens, so we had a kitten. I had a rabbit with 3 legs because we trapped it, and a willy wagtail.
Oh, yeah.
So you made pets of everything.
The wagtail stayed around?
Yeah, it did go off eventually, but amazingly it got on with the cat and the dog, and because they were all together, but it'd just fly around with you and land on you, and we just stole it out of a nest, obviously. Yeah, so.
Do you remember that transition going into school?
Yes. So I was in grade 3. We moved to Mildura to a school first, and that was, I think it was 180 people.
Wow.
But it was one of the scariest things I'd ever done. So back then I was very scared of everything industrial, I guess, because just living out back where you had a free life. And
well, there'd be different noises and different smells and lots of people.
Exactly, yes. And one of Mum's biggest problems was keeping me in school because shearing time was just so exciting. All I wanted to be was in the sheep yard and helping and mustering. Yeah.
So what was next? What was after school for you, Peter?
After school, I worked for my grandfather till 1978, which was about 4 years. Then he sold the property to National Parks and Wildlife, New South Wales. A lot of people said that he was forced to, but in hindsight, Dad and I thought we were going to take over the property, and we offered to buy it, and he said, no, I think it's not really a living area now, and I'd like it preserved. So that's the direction he took. And then I worked for National Parks and Wildlife for 4 years.
Looking after that station?
Yes.
Oh, good.
So stayed involved in that. Once again, doing pest management, a lot of it. So.
And then they took the sheep off that then?
Yeah, all the stock were taken off. So I transitioned from farming, merino sheep farming, there was no cropping then, back then out there, to conservation then, really, and never looked back, I suppose. But Dad was already, he'd moved into town, or into a littler property in town. I had twin brother and sister as well, so they stayed in town for schooling. And my grandfather was quite pleased to see it preserved and looked after that way, especially with all the cultural findings around their significance, And it became World Heritage listed as well, that area, so.
Wow.
Yeah.
So where to after Mungo?
Actually, I was married while I was there, so Colleen and I got married while I was working for National Parks and Wildlife. We then thought you could become a ranger by years of service, but during that time it became you had to have a university degree, so schooling wasn't on my cards. So we left and basically went shearing for the next 10 or 12 years.
Really?
With a good friend of mine.
Around New South Wales?
Yes, mostly within 250 k's of area, shearing and crutching sheep. which was a fairly hard job, but when you were fit to it, it was just a job. So
it's a young man's game, isn't it?
yes, it is. Bit too much drinking then probably, but you needed it.
Yeah.
And then gradually, as we had a 3-year-old eventually working shearing, we ran like local teams, mostly related people, up to 6 stand sheds. So we were pretty busy for a few years, and then moved into town as well again, and I went into different things, like managed a turf farm from a good friend for probably 10 years. Went into a couple of my own businesses like trucks. Dad was carting citrus. So everything to do with on the land. But, and it was all good life, all hard work, but busy. And
How many kids do you have?
had 3 boys. And ironically now, the oldest boy's got 4 boys, and number 2 son's got 3 girls, and number 3 son's no children yet.
Right.
So
Oh, quite a crew.
yes.
So yourself and your wife Colleen took on a massive job at Neds Corner, just west of Mildura. Was this a management contract, and can you tell me a bit about this?
Well, I very luckily ended up there because of a drought. We were still running the turf farm when my friend had passed away, and his brother took over and the drought hit, so the turf farm was sold. And I got onto a drought assistance scheme with the Mallee Catchment Management Authority, and within a few weeks we're working with a couple of teams on Neds Corner, cleaning up old fencing, doing rabbits, ripping rabbit warrens, those sorts of things. I think there was 8 Indigenous guys working with us and about 10 or 12 others. And luckily for me, I ended up a team leader. And when I met the guys at Neds Corner, I must have looked like I was doing something right. They said, we've got a manager's job coming up, would you apply? And I got that.
And this is for Trust for Nature?
For Trust for Nature, yes. So I was pretty excited about that. The funny thing was, when we went there, they'd never had a really long-term manager or management system organised, and we sort of didn't know where to start. But once we did, we got into tree planting and continued with the rabbits. By the time we'd left after 15 years, we'd treated 30,000 rabbit warrens.
Yeah.
You know, done 600 kilometres of 1080 baiting. We'd worked on the pigs and foxes and cats. Everything was seen busy, but we ran it more like our own farm. We always said to Trust for Nature we'd give it back when we passed on, but...
So what did you see when you first arrived there?
It was very, well, it was sort of droughty, so it was blowing sands and needed like good seasons to help it out. There was a bit of cropping still being done up in the top with share farmers, but it was very bare and open, and because a lot of it was that higher lake bed country anyway. So.
Yeah. And previously they had sheep on there, did they?
Yes, sheep and cattle and horses, and so a lot of stock over the years.
How big are we talking? How many acres?
It was 73,000 acres.
Was ground cover the biggest issue when you got there?
It was, yes. And even on the clay pans and that, they were still open and blowing. The rabbits were doing a lot of damage then because of their numbers. We actually started spotlight transects, and for the 100-kilometre spotlight transect we'd do 4 times a year. We started 35 rabbits per kilometre average around, and that's just, they annihilate the country when they're like that. No little trees can grow, or of course the rabbit wants an open grass country, so they'll kill every tree that shoots up. But by the time we left, for quite a number of years, we'd got the population down to 0.4 of a rabbit per
From
kilometre.
35, wow.
Yeah. So that was a really great achievement. Yeah.
So the rabbits were a bit to blame for taking away the plants and the native shrubs.
Yes.
And these were habitat for birds, reptiles and small animals.
Exactly, yes.
And you wanted to bring them back.
Yes, and previously the stock had done the damage, but the rabbits had built up as well. And yes, that's where we started just planting. I think we did about 1,100 kilometres of seed lines.
Right.
Direct seeding seed, native seed,
Oh,
which would have been in each area. Some successful, some not. We planted around 40,000 tube stock trees, which probably 80% of them were successful, so that was good.
Really? And did you have big teams come in and help you? Or was
We did for plantings. Mallee's Catchment Management Authority, we had always had a good relationship with them, and National Parks Victoria, so we worked in with a lot of what they were doing as well. We did have some young Indigenous trainees come out and do different plots, which was great to see because they could get back on country and do work. A lot of it, when it came to the watering side of them, some years we'd have to water a lot, some we didn't water at all.
did you have to guard them?
We did some patches. Initially, we just did too many, like one planting could have been 14,000 trees. So.
I've been fortunate enough to produce various videos with you at Neds Corner, and the transformation is incredible, really. And to quote, you've turned it into a jewel of the landscape. How do you feel about it now and how it's looking?
Oh, just proud of what we've achieved. We take the credit because we were there, but you know, everyone's helped in different ways. But it's just, you've got all these native trees and shrubs growing where we didn't have them before. The grasses have come back, the clay pans have started to cover. We had a group of scientists from all over the world, soil scientists, visit. I didn't know they'd previously been 10 years before, even while it was a cattle property.
Yeah.
And they were just amazed with how the clay pans had crusted up and things had changed. So when those types of people come, you realise what good's been done for the environment. And we just, when we did leave Ned's Corner, we just said to ourselves, well, we feel we've left a legacy, and hopefully we'll be remembered for what we were able to do there. So.
And you brought back some animals too?
Yes. People used to say that I kept one in the freezer for each year, but each year we seem to find different, quite rare species of animals. The little dunarts.
Yeah. There was a particular type of snake you found again too?
Yes, the mud adder, we called it, Devis snake, that lived along the edge of the water with, lives on frogs. Quite a placid little snake, but comes out at night. It was very interesting, a pretty snake, if there is such a thing, which lived on the frogs there, and that brought us to finding quite a rare growling grass frog that was in that country, because we heard it while we were looking. There was many. There was another little Mitchell's snake, even smaller one, that was sort of rediscovered there. Then we went into the little mammals like Giles Plenagar. Quite a few of them started to appear. They were obviously there before.
Really?
Yeah, so...
What are they?
They're about the size of a mouse, but I often used to say it looked like you stood on them because they were fairly flat, and they lived in the cracks of the clay and used to run around in them, and they'd pop out at night. Quite savage, like maybe a bit smaller than a mouse, and they'd latch onto your finger. They're full of teeth. I think they're related to the Tasmanian devil.
Right.
But it didn't hurt. But if they got a moth, they just tore it to bits. It was funny to watch. Yeah.
You put in a really big fence there around one section. What was that about?
That was basically to protect an area that we thought was pretty significant. The re-veg had gone really well over the years. We wanted to get a rabbit-free zone, which we were nearly to. It also fenced off quite significant burial areas to protect them, so that was good to bring them into it. We started to see rare plants appearing that weren't there before. these little animals especially in there, bringing the birds back. Even things like pink cockatoos, they're called now, which is one of my favourite birds, appeared a couple of times, but just feeding, that sort of thing.
So rabbits were your main objective to start with, I suppose, to get them down, and then that brought on a lot of other things.
Yes.
And Peter, you've been involved with VRAN, that's the Victorian Rabbit Action Network, and their involvement is quite powerful, isn't it? Really passionate people.
Yes, we did a couple of workshops out that way, and they're a great group of people just dedicated to rabbit control. And I sort of first met them at Neds Corner and then had a lot to do with them, and now have the honour of being a mentor within that group, so quite proud of that fact. So I'm getting a bit older now, so I've probably, along with Tim, I've probably had as much experience as anybody with firstly making money out of rabbits, and then, well, I'm still making money out of them because it's my job to help manage and control them.
Yeah. And just to jump in now, Peter mentioned Tim from VRAN. And to let you know, there's a fascinating podcast with Tim published a few episodes ago. Search Tim Bloomfield in Salt of the Earth Farm Stories. And Peter, what would the average rainfall be at Neds Corner?
It's about, back to old measurements, but about 8 inches, which isn't that high. I think that's 250 mil.
It's not much.
Not a lot, no. And during the drought years, you might have half that. It's almost desert country, really.
Yeah.
As you go further south, it starts to pick up slightly, but it's just amazing country though, with all the river bends and red gums. And yeah, anybody that goes there, whether they go there fishing or for birding or conservation reasons. We even have sort of fungi, saying that Colleen and I have the honour of having a fungi named after us.
Really?
While there was a group of scientists there doing a blitz.
Really?
And
what's it called?
It's called Colpetius.
Love it. Colleen and Peter.
Yes. Right. They had to put 6 names up and vote on what they called it. So it was a new fungus for the world.
Really?
So yeah, it's quite an honour.
Wow, well done. Yeah, it's a beautiful place to shoot, and for a camera operator, I've walked down there on the river with you a few times and out into the scrub, and you've pointed out lots of little interesting things. So yeah, it's a great spot for a camera person.
Yeah.
You brought back a lot of different species of saltbush and bluebush too, is that right?
Yes, well, they sort of just gradually redid themselves because they seed really well in good season. 2010-11 we had all those rains, and because we had the rabbit population knocked down at that stage, there wasn't much else to hold them back. They did very well, so they gradually spread out. And saltbush tends to take over big old dry lake beds until maybe another flood, and then that knocks them out again, so they're moving in and out all the time.
Yeah.
But it just transformed that lake bed country during 2010-11 with the rain.
Yeah.
One rain we had the annual rainfall sort of in 2 days.
Oh, no.
So water was flowing off the lake bed for about 8 hours back towards the river.
Do damage?
Not really, no. It just, one of the funniest things, I went out the back door of our house there, the manager's house, and coming off the airstrip, a trickle of water coming down, maybe a foot wide in places, but winding towards the river, and we were 300 metres off the river, and there's a yabby heading south. I don't know where it was going, but it's walking in against the current of the water, yeah.
Do you remember your hottest day out there?
Definitely. We had 1 year there, would have been early 2000s, I guess. No, anyway, we had 9 days over 40, 8 days over 46, and one of them was 50 degrees.
50 degrees.
And that was getting a bit too warm.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Was there any tricks in retaining that moisture in the soil?
Not for us, really. For cropping, it's a different situation, but it's just the fact that it's there is good. We didn't do any earthworks, or actually it's better not to, because your annual weeds come in if you're disturbing soils, so very little soil disturbance. We kept the tracks up mainly for access around the property, kept them in good condition, but that's about all other than ripping rabbits. We were fairly restricted with ripping rabbits because of the cultural significance of the area. So I guess out of the 30,000 warrants we treated, we probably ripped 19,000 of them. And to be realistic, to get rid of the rabbits, you have to destroy the warrant structure properly. But if you can't disturb, you don't want to be disturbing burials, so you do different methods around close to burials.
And that's quite moving too, to witness some of those burial sites being exposed.
Absolutely, yes. Some people get quite upset around burial sites. I was talking to Uncle Norm about it one day, and he said, you should have the smoking and that too after you've been to it, and you may have dreams. And I said, no, I have never have any issues with it, because I feel like I've always been helping burial areas, so I never have any issues with it. So
yeah, good way to look at it.
Yeah.
So some of these trees now, are they regenerating?
They are, and you can even collect seed for more plantings from them, which is really good. We were just starting to, especially the acacias and that, they get going really well. Some plant species don't seem to do well from seed that we put in the ground, but yet tube stocks, they do very well. So I haven't been back for a couple of years, but some of the pine trees would be maybe 2-3 metres high now on the ridges. So looking forward to having a look at it again at some stage.
It's an absolute credit to you and Colleen of what you've done out there, and I believe it's getting handed back over now.
Yes, the First Peoples of the Millewa Mallee have started a group in Mildura, and the property will eventually be handed back to the title holder of the area. So that's really looking forward to that. We had the Ningtate people out there quite often working in the area, and that's their home country. So a lot of them come from around Renmark area, from along the river, and that will happen. It's not really a set date yet, I don't think, but it's in the process of happening.
So in the last couple of years, you've had some pretty major things happen in your life too.
Yes.
One, a heart scare, and then an overseas trip for a couple of months.
Yes. The heart scare made me realise you've got to live life while you're here. I'm actually fitter than I've been for a long time now, so that's good. And then we were never going to go overseas, but recently Colleen's two sisters invited us to go, and we said, oh, it looks pretty good. So we've been over, and that was so interesting just to see different lifestyles and country and how people are living. But I came to the conclusion that we live in the best country in the world.
Thank you, yes, absolutely. So what are you doing now, Peter?
I'm supposedly semi-retired, but we've started work part-time with a group called Cassinia, based in Kyneton, down in Victoria. They have bought properties in New South Wales and South Australia and have different branches within the group, but quite young and enthusiastic people. It's so good working with such a wonderful group that they're real people doing real things out there in the environment.
Conservation-wise?
Conservation-wise, yes. Working with companies from overseas, they're funded through that system, and mostly I'm just doing, not a managerial role, but Colleen and I are looking after a property out about 40 kilometres as the crow flies from Neds Corner south,
right,
bordering Sunset National Park.
Yeah.
So that's quite interesting. It's we say only 5,000 acres because we came off 70,000 acres, but it's quite a large area of land. And
What are you doing there?
revegetation, we've planted 17,000 trees,
Already?
tube stocks this year. A group came up and did that. Seeded 11,000 hectares, I think it is. So next year's 45,000 tube stocks going in this patch. And one of the things I like about what this group do, they get these properties that are quite marginal, and they're still going to lease some cropping ground out. So you've got your environmental with food production, if you like, still happening. So they've just...
It's finding that balance, isn't it?
It is, yes. And I quite like that idea where we're doing both the jobs, helping the environment and helping the farming as well. Although I think farmers are very brave people in cropping country.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, mate, congratulations on all that and what you've done so far. And I know the Cassinia group will be lucky to have you on board, yourself and Colleen.
Thank
you. Now, this is the fun part, Peter. We've got some off-the-wall questions.
Okay.
All right, so these are just short answers.
Yes.
What do people misunderstand about you most?
Probably my how I'm slow and steady.
I don't know, you just planted 17,000 trees this year. You're not slow and steady at all.
No.
All right. What is your favourite tool?
Favourite tool? It'd be my hammer.
Okay.
Actually, I collect old antique wooden handle tools.
All right.
Yes. So I was lucky enough, because I was quite ill for a while, I've set them up in display now. They were just in boxes and building up in the shed, so quite lucky.
Nice. So hammers and saws.
Saws, all wooden handle tools, yes.
If you could be remembered for one thing, what would it be?
I'd say my efforts with conservation and rabbit control. That's very proud of what Colleen and I have achieved over the years since we started in conservation. And conservation is just, to me, another type of farming. I tell my friends that are still in farming, I'm the lucky one. I don't have stock to worry about, just saving the environment.
Yeah, well done. And you do it very well. What has been your favourite job you've held?
Definitely Neds Corner Station. That was a great achievement, and my work colleagues were just fantastic to work with. So I had a wonderful boss during that period, and had several over the times, but that's definitely going to come down as an achievement. Yes.
And if you could give your 18-year-old self some advice, what would it be?
Never regret anything and learn from all your mistakes.
Yeah.
And I think you have to make mistakes to learn how to do things.
Are there 2 or 3 most influential people in your life?
Oh, definitely. My good friend Peter Clark was. He died too young at 49 with a brain tumour.
Sorry.
Wonderful person. My wife Colleen, obviously. And my grandfather and my father, all I've learnt was from them, to do with the land, and just having the love of land is it's within you, it's not built in you, you just feel part of it, part of the environment. I think I love walking around with local elders in the bush. I thought I was really switched onto it, but the things they see and hear are just amazing. And just making a short story longer, Colleen and I, over the last 10 years or so, have every 2 years gone to Western Australia into the deserts doing research within Aboriginal communities. That's our volunteer holidays.
Wow.
With a large group of people called Desert Discovery. And we were in over those years in charge of the mammal reptile trapping team, and we got to see some wonderful reptiles mostly that we trapped, and we mapped the areas for them. Some were quite common, but they were new for that area.
Yeah.
So that was exciting doing that. And there's a group of of botanists and that go with us as well. So just another thing we enjoyed doing, working with the local elders, and yeah.
Fascinating. Is there something about your career you didn't expect?
Probably conservation.
Yeah.
I really just fell into that because of the drought and got the job. But when I look back over history, a lot of things I did and my family did, they were conservation minded because the love of the bush and the mallee, and that's not something I thought about originally. Yeah.
Now, what time of the day do you get your best work done?
Sunrise.
Yep.
Definitely. It's just a beautiful part of the day.
If you could have a coffee or a cold beer with anyone, who would you choose?
I would say my mates.
Yeah.
Yes. I have some really good mates I'm trying to learn to play golf again with.
Good.
And we catch up. One in particular, Anthony's been a friend since school, and a lot of these things I've talked about we've done together over the time, and we're now turning into, hopefully he's working a lot harder than I am, but semi-retirement and enjoying life.
And if you could live anywhere in the world, where would it be?
Here in this district, in Mildura area. I guess I've travelled Australia a lot, and it's just absolutely beautiful, but this is home. And Mungo area, 250 kilometres around here, that's home.
Well, Peter, you've got a huge amount of respect, not only around Australia, but around the world. And you've done incredible things, and you've made this country a better place.
Thank you very much.
Well done, Peter. I really appreciate your time, and it's been great to chat to you.
It's great to catch up again. Yes, thank you.
Well done, mate. Also, it'd be great if you could follow us on Facebook. Search Salt of the Earth Farm Stories. Proudly brought to you by Grig Media.